I'd like to speak to you on the subject of the power of vision in leadership. Because the greatest challenge that I believe that your country is facing is unity. My research on South Africa over the last 15 years has shown me that there's great potential in this place that could set a standard for the entire continent. Your past, the world knows. It's your future they don't know about. And vision is not about the past. We can sit for 10 years discussing the past. We can sit for 10 years describing the present. We can sit for 10 years complaining about the present and the past. But life is not about the past. We must not deny the past. We must not necessarily forget the past, but we must never live in it. And the secret to living life effectively on earth is knowing how to balance your life between the present and the future. I can speak to you as a country with some authority because I also came from a country that had a similar past. We are still coming out of it. I was born in an island 7 miles wide and 20 miles long. That island made up a chain of islands called the Bahamas in the Caribbean. The island I was born on had a wall built down the middle of it. I will never forget that wall. The wall was built by the imperialists and the colonial powers that took over those islands. They made sure that we stayed on one side of the wall and they on the other. We had to get permission to cross the wall. I remember there were schools we could not attend because it was not for us. I remember restaurants we couldn't eat in because it was off limits. I remember cinemas we could not attend to watch movies because it was not allowed. There are places we could not only not live, we could not even drive through. It was an amazing experience to me as a young teenager. I've lived on both sides of life. In 1962, our nation, which was basically run by 4 families from Europe, who owned 98% of the economy, has subjected us to basically sophisticated slaves. I've been there. In 1962, we decided that that was enough. And so we rose up as peacefully as possible. There was no bloodshed, but there was tension for a moment. And the black leaders of our country, which consists of 98% black people, decided that they would approach the minority government and demand not just civil rights, but the most important rights, human rights. No one can make you a human. And that moment of tension was culminated when one of the black leaders picked up the mace in the House of Assembly and threw it through the window because that mace represented authority that was oppressing. The mace fell on the ground among the people and fell apart. The crown rolled on the ground, and even to this day we cannot find the mace. We don't know who picked it up, but that was the act that changed our lives, because we defied authority that had no right to be an authority. There was an election held after that, demanded by the majority. It's amazing that when the count was finished, the minority party won with 98% of the population being black, because they divided the boundaries just in a way that they were able to win more seats. Of course, the election was not accepted. And there was a national strike. And we shut the country down and demanded fair elections. There was a march downtown. And there was nervousness everywhere. Will there be bloodshed? But our leader, who was a graduate of Oxford University in London, who had grown up not too far from where I was born, decided we will go the peaceful way. Elections were held, the boundaries were redrawn, and the rest is history. The first act of our government, our newly elected black government. By the way, as soon as we won the election, there was a white flight. What is a white flight? All the whites flew. They abandoned the country. They even made it clear publicly that no country ruled by such people could succeed. So they ran to England and Canada and ran to America. They fled to New Zealand and Australia, and they left us to ourselves. We disappointed them. Today, the Bahamas is the #1 leading tourist destination in the Western Hemisphere. We have the most stable government in the entire Western Hemisphere. Our dollar is 1-on-1 par with the US dollar. We have one of the highest literacy rates in the entire world. Check the internet. Almost 82% of our graduates go to college. I have 3 degrees, bachelor's degrees. I have a master's degree and 3 doctorate degrees bestowed upon me. I was born sleeping on the floor with rats and roaches. Our government spent 56% of its first budget on education. Because the government realized that unless we educate the people, there will never be a future, never be unity, and never be sanity. The second pillar of our government was to establish social consciousness, to give us a pride of being who we are. So all the curriculum was based on what they call Bahamianization, which was a policy that says that all those who were foreigners that ruled our country had to train a local and required to train them within 3 years or they would be expatriated. Today, we are the #1 nation for gold medals in the Olympics. We cannot explain our success, except when you read our Constitution for our country has a preamble at the beginning of it, and it says this in writing in the Constitution, that these islands of the Bahamas shall be governed on the principles of the biblical Christian faith. It's constitutionally ingrained. How can a nation of 300,000 people be so influential? Because you don't need to be big to be great. So our values are clear in our country. Any policy that is made in our nation must be in alignment with those values we established. Any law that's to be considered must consult with the values we established on the basic of the Christian faith. How did we create unity in our country? In your nation, it's a little bit more challenging because Not only do you have the divisions among the historical apartheid challenges that you still struggle with, which you will struggle for the next 20 years, I promise you, because you cannot legislate love. You cannot legislate acceptance. But the key, and your struggle is greater, is because not only do you have those differences, but you have tribalism. And the kings here tonight, and the princesses, and the royal leaders here tonight represent some of those challenges. The native tribes of this great continent have a great history, and they should admire and cherish the legacy of those histories. My great-grandfather came from Africa on a slave ship. I have a right to talk to you. And if nothing else, I want to warn this nation that you must be careful that you never allow tribalism to become more important than national unity. The qualities of the values that are built in to our local traditional systems are very important. They teach our people about their dignity, their sense of pride. We need our traditions to be protected, to keep in touch with our roots with regards to our glory of the past. That's why it's important to honor those who represent those traditions tonight. But my hope is that you will never allow any of those precious values that you have embraced so dearly to become a source of contradiction in the pursuit of unity as a country. The first civilization on earth was built by a black man. His name was Nimrod. He was an African. It's found in the 11th chapter of the Bible. He's the first one to build a city. He was the first one to establish a citadel. It was he who had a vision to build a tower. He felt so much power. And he said, we will build a tower. And he had a vision of bringing people together around this one tower. And he said something that's very dangerous. He said, we will build the tower, but we'll do it unto our name. South Africa, listen to me. The moment you think you are more important than God, you are finished. He was a great leader. The people came together, they believed in his vision, and they began to build it. They took rocks and mortar, and they took tar, and they designed an awesome architectural structure. And this great African civilization began to rise from the earth. And if you read the biblical text, it says, God looked at the project and said to himself, are you ready for this? He said, if these people, as one people, speaking the same language, believing the same thing, begin to do this thing, I'm quoting God, then nothing shall be impossible to them. He was telling us the power of unity. If there's one thing you must be afraid of in South Africa, it's division. So God says, I'm going to use a word you never heard before. He said, let us go down and stop the project. That's found in the Bible. He didn't say let me go down, because only one of him. When people get together, God says, not just me, I'm going to take all of me down there. Unity was so powerful and dangerous, it made all of God come down. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit had to come down. The only time God ever used that term before that was when he said, let us make man. And the second time he used it, he says, let us go destroy what man's doing. Why? Because he's trying to do it without us. The streets for and building houses for. What is the motivation for all of your legislation? Are you building for yourself? Do you know how God destroyed the project? He never shot a bullet, never shot an arrow, and never called an army. He destroyed it with tribalism. Do you remember, Mr. Educator? He simply confused the languages. And everything fell apart. What made them unified? And that's what I want to leave you with tonight. What made them unified was one vision. The greatest gift God ever gave man is not the gift of sight, but the gift of vision. Why? Because sight is just a function of the eyes, but vision is a function of the heart. Sight shows you what is. Vision shows you what could be. Sight is limited to the present, but vision transports us to the frontiers of the uncharted future. This is why leadership is not leadership until they have a vision. Leadership is not about the present. It's not about maintaining the past. Leadership is about taking people to a future they never saw. Leadership is going from the known to the unknown. Because sight restricts you to the present, but vision releases you to the impossible. I want to warn South Africa. It's like in my own country, I worked with our government. I worked with the Prime Minister. I was involved in the administration and still am. I've been appointed by the government to be a diplomatic representative for our country. I've received the OB award from the Queen, all the stuff I've gotten. But none of that is more important to me than protecting the national vision of my country. I want to warn you. South Africa, you are a child. You are a baby. You've just been born. That makes you very vulnerable. And somehow we have come to despise the most important thing we possess. Do you know what it is? Being third world. Some of you think that third world is a negative word. I love the word. That's why we call our organization Third World. You know why? I love it because the first world messed up. The second world is bankrupt. They can't pay their bills. Talk to Obama. The only world that is left, and God ain't got no more on earth, is you and me. The third world is the only hope the future has right now. And my fear is you are looking back at the second world and calling it first world and trying to become like them. Who has more crime than America? First world. Who has more incest and abuse and domestic violence? First world. Who can't pay their bills? First world. Whose economy is collapsing? Europe. Whose dollar and euros are unstable? America and Europe. Who is still racist? They can't handle a black man being president. You know that. They are in shock. You see, sometimes we attempt to emulate failures. I come to challenge you. South Africa must not use the first world as the standard. God wants you to create another world they never seen before. You got solutions in this country that has not been invented yet by the first and second world. The third world are the greatest hope the world has. You are smart people, intelligent brains. You have ideas they never thought about yet. You are solving problems they never even imagined could be solved, and the future is still bright. I want you to not follow them. Let them follow you. In the next 10 years, you shall emerge as an influence in the world, because the future is the third world nations. That's why India is a reality, and China cannot be denied, and Brazil is unstoppable, and Peru is on the rise. Why? It's our time. Clap. You got to believe that what you have, everybody needs. So the Springboks will be admired around the world very soon. Vision is the key to leadership. Let me stress to you before I take my seat that one of the most important things you must do as a country is to understand that vision is always greater than the visionary. Even though a leader must preserve and protect the noble traditions of the past, they must never allow those traditions to stop the future. You are a leader. I'm talking to you. What makes you a leader is you're supposed to possess a vision of the future, because vision is the source and the purpose for leadership. The visionary leader is simply a catalyst for the vision, but they are not bigger than the vision. Vision is generational. Vision is transferable. Vision is fulfilled in phases. You were born to do a piece of the vision, not all of it. And when it's time to leave office, please leave. And this is why we must be careful when we talk about vision. You are only a link in a long chain. And it's more important for you to leave early than to stay too late. Vision may be personal, but it's never private. And vision is seasonal. There comes a time when vision must be moved forward. And you got to be conscious of the right timing of everything. Change is inevitable. The richest man that ever lived on earth said these words. He said, without a vision, the people perish. You know what he did not say? Without a leader. He made vision more important than the leader, because leaders are dispensable. What I admire most about your first president is that he was a real leader. Real leaders know they are dispensable and temporary, so they give up power easily. There comes a time when you know your brain is too old. We need new ideas, fresh ideas. Embrace the youth. Bring in young minds. Keep company with young mavericks. Let them stretch your thinking patterns. Leaders are not afraid of competition. They love it. As a matter of fact, any leader who's afraid of someone smarter than them is dumb. Ronald Reagan said once, they asked him, you're an actor, they said. You're just an actor. How did you become so successful? He said, you're right. I was trained to be an actor in Hollywood. He said, my secret to my success as a president is I understand my weakness. And so I staff my weaknesses. You are not born to do everything. So make room for people to come into the vision who can take all of us forward. Without a vision, it says, the people perish. The word perish in that statement, I did the Hebrew research on it. It means to throw off discipline. Vision keeps you disciplined. When a country establishes a clear national vision, it disciplines all the different departments, it disciplines all the policies, it disciplines all legislation discussion, it disciplines all the behavior of the people. In other words, when a nation has a clear vision, it disciplines the country. One of the weaknesses about democracy is that every time there's a new leader, he feels obligated to destroy what the previous leader built. There's no national vision. We must mature from that and realize that the vision is bigger than political parties. When I first met your president, Mr. Nelson Mandela, he came to the Bahamas. As soon as he came out of prison, the first place he came was the Bahamas, my country. His first flight was to the Bahamas. Do you know why? Because it was my prime minister who agitated at the UN to have him released from prison. Do you know why? They went to school together. They were friends. And he fought the UN. And he said, you must dismantle apartheid and get that man out of prison. He did nothing except he had a conviction. And behind the scenes, our prime minister fought and fought with the big giants until a groundswell was created. And Mr. Mandela knew his first act would be to go and tell his friend, thank you. When he arrived in Nassau, Bahamas, I got a call from the prime minister. He said, look, we're having a private dinner with the newly released Mr. Mandela. I'm only inviting a handful of people. You're one of them. I walked in that room. Mr. Mandela was at the door shaking hands with people. He was frail, just out of prison. When I shook his hands, it felt like rock in my hands. It was hard. I shook and wept because I was shaking hands with history and the future. He saw my face as I expressed my shock at the hardness of his hand. And he smiled, that beautiful smile. He said, son, sit with me. When the dinner began, they sat me 2 seats from history. He eventually turned to me in the middle of the meal. He says, I noticed that you were disturbed when you shook my hands. I said, yes, sir. I was so embarrassed. He said, you know why my hand is hard? It's hard because of 25 years of using a hatchet to chop rocks. Four years ago, I went to Robben Island myself. I went to the same cell he slept in. I lie on that concrete myself and I wept. And then the guy took me outside and showed me some of the rocks. His hand was callous. And then he said something to me I'll never forget. He said, son, true leaders never seek followers. He said, followers are attracted to true leaders. I want to commend all of you who are part of the struggle tonight. Thank you. You did a good job. Your hand is hard too, I know. You see, leadership always takes a price. Your young people must always know the story. MC, make sure it's in the curriculum. Because what you don't know the cost of, you abuse. I leave you with this. Vision is the only reason leadership exists. Because leadership is responsible for taking people from where they are to a place that you see. Leaders really don't live in the present. They live in the future. Because they have been to that place already. All true leaders live in the future. And this is why it's difficult to deal with them. How can you deal with a man who talks like this? I have a dream. And he's dreaming it while black men are being whipped with hoses in Georgia. I have a dream. When segregation was strong in Alabama. I have a dream. I see little white boys and little black girls walking hand in hand. The man was seeing things. What do you see for South Africa? Leaders don't live in the present. I say to your majesties here, in honor of all of your great legacy and all of the rituals that you are part of and all the beautiful joy you experience as influencing your people, and in the midst of all of the regalia you wear and the circumstance and the pomp and circumstance, all the beauty that you do, my question is, where are you taking the village? I have a dream. Do you have a dream? You pastors. Yes, you. Where are you taking the people spiritually? What do you see for the future of the church and for the city and for the community? I have a dream. Do you have one, pastor? Or are you simply collecting a salary? Leadership is not about being paid. It's about paying your debt to humanity. It is vision that separates the follower from the leader. And our world, especially right now, we need help. Nothing's working in any country. And so the solution to changing the present and avoiding the past is visionary leadership. Men and women, we must understand that visionary leadership is the ability to cause others to see a vision of the future that's bigger than their private ambitions. And this is why true visionary leaders do not steal money. True visionary leaders, they make purpose more important than paychecks. They live by principles and not by preference. True leaders pay the price for being right. We need visionary leaders who motivate people to submit their energies and their skills in a corporate commitment to achieve a noble cause that benefits everyone. I remember the night when Mr. Mandela leaned to me just before we ended, and he said, "Son, I don't know you too well, but I see hope in your eyes. You're going to be great." I didn't know that within 6 months I would be invited back to South Africa for the first time to meet with the Dutch Reformed Church. I was the first black man to speak to their council. They wanted help. Mr. Mandela said to me, "Son, remember, a true vision never benefits the visionary." If your vision only makes you rich, it is not a vision. It's ambition. If your vision only buys you a nice car, it's not a vision. It's ambition. If your vision only makes you build a big house, it's not a vision. It's an ambition. Are you a leader? Leaders don't live for themselves. They live for the people. And so the greatest leader of all times said these words: "If you want to be great, you must become the servant of everybody." Let us dream of a new South Africa, a big South Africa, and let it be led with visionary leaders. Thank you very much. I love you. God bless South Africa. God bless my cousins. God bless everybody in this great continent. Thank you very much, and I'll see you at the top.
Marketplace with Charles Ngobeni.